Let's take an inside look at the Raiders' Week 2 matchup up against the Baltimore Ravens. If you bleed silver and black, if you're a part of the flock, no matter what, this is a show that you need to see because everything that you need to know about this week's matchup from both sides is going to be here on today's show. So what I like to do is I like to sit down with somebody from Chat Sports. His name's Joey Peterson. He covers the Ravens here. And we're going to be looking at the biggest storylines for the Ravens, plus all the biggest strengths, weaknesses, but ultimately the keys to victory of how the Raiders are going to get a dub on the road. Both teams right now are 0-1, so definitely something to consider here, which the Raiders at Ravens, and if you didn't watch our Madden stream, you definitely should have gone out there and checked that one out because it was an overtime thriller. Unbelievable game. If you haven't seen it, look up Raiders versus Ravens Madden simulation. It's going to be us. But make sure you're tuned in on Sunday for our watch party. It's going to be a little bit of an earlier game. We're going to get started at least an hour before kickoff. If you're not subscribed, are you actually bleeding silver and black? So our Ravens rundown host, he said this, and it kind of lit a little bit of a fire underneath my butt, and I hope it lights a little bit of a fire underneath yours. Joey Peterson said this: I'm not sure what's more embarrassing, Raiders fans fighting each other or what the Ravens are about to do to them on Sunday. The flock will own the nation, and I can't wait. Honestly, it's that last part that ticked me off the most. I can't guarantee you the Raiders are going to win. But if there's one thing I'm not going to stand for, is people besmirching the nation's name. It's the best fan base out there. So here's what he did. He did this exact same video. Here's the thumbnail. I'm going to put that video in the comments and in the description of today's show. I want our fans, the nation, to show them who's really going to pack that spot. If you guys can go spam Raiders on that video, believe me, it would help me out a lot, and I think it would zip him up just a little bit. Coming up here on the show, let's get into some Ravens storylines against the Raiders. Just like we got storylines, they got storylines as well. The first one is Lamar Jackson 100% healthy? I know that Jackson has been practicing, but still with the amount of big-time hits that he took against the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football, not being able to practice, definitely something to be watching out there. And I know that Devontae Adams said that he's the best runner that he's ever seen. Patrick Graham has also been speaking very highly of Lamar Jackson, and quite frankly, you have to be able to make sure that he is not the one beating you. And if he's 95% healthy, 90% healthy, I'm not saying you got to go out there and hit him, but Lamar Jackson is a quarterback, and this is just a cold hard fact. Hell, I bet Lamar would even admit it, that you can hit him and kind of get away with it a little bit more than you can a guy like Mahomes. And this is what Patrick Graham said about number 8. At some point, you have to rush the edge, but when you watch the film, if 3 guys pass him, you're asking for a disaster. I think all that is saying there is Patrick Graham wants to play back a little bit. He wants to be aggressive, obviously, but still, like, if you're going to bring 3 and there's a lot of open field there, even if Lamar's not 100% healthy, he could beat you with your legs, man. So should the Raiders use a quarterback spy against Lamar Jackson? Give me a yes, give me a no. I've seen this being debated in terms of maybe you should switch up what you do on defense, just do what you do. But sometimes, man, you got to go and you got to do something a little bit different. For me personally, I'm going to sit up here and say, yeah, you do got to run a QB spy. And I'm not saying that it has to just be one guy. It doesn't have to be a basketball term here. I don't need to run a box and one with just one defender. But you know who I am going to set the responsibilities to? I'm going to put our top 2 linebackers, Robert Spillane, Divine Diablo. You guys are going to be doing a lot of the QB spying on Lamar Jackson. And to make it a little bit more difficult on Baltimore, what about Isaiah Paul-Mayo once in a while? He could play nickel, he could play safety, he could play linebacker. It could be a sneaky option to have him play a little bit of QB spy on Lamar Jackson. Let's go to Ravens storyline number 2 here. Will Isaiah likely be another tight end that the Raiders have to worry about? I know the silver and black at times have struggled against Travis Kelce, but I think they've done a halfway decent job against tight ends. But for Baltimore, they're going to also use a lot of 2 tight end sets. They're going to go out there and use Mark Andrews. And the game that likely had last week against Kansas City was a very impressive one. Saw 12 targets, had 9 catches, 111 yards, and 1 touchdown. Likely is more of a speedster compared to Mark Andrews. Andrews is more of the overall better tight end. But for a guy like Marcus Epps, for a guy like Trevon Merrick, this could be a big game for them. Hell, maybe even Isaiah Paul-Mayo if he's not playing QB spy on Lamar Jackson. The Raiders want to bring different fronts to confuse Baltimore's offensive line. But for the Raiders, that's then going to put a little bit more pressure on some of those secondary guys, and you cannot afford to give up the big plays like Kansas City did last week against Likely. Let's go to the third storyline here that we're going to talk about, and it's will Kyle Van Noy play against the Raiders. He has a weird eye injury going on, and he's upset right now with the Chiefs medical staff. The reason why this is a big loss for Baltimore is because of all the different things that he can do. He can play edge, he can play linebacker, he can drop back into coverage, go get the quarterback. He's a player that I bring up all the time on this show because he's a guy that I've really wanted the Raiders to go out and get for quite some time. This is what Kyle Van Noy had to say about the Chiefs medical team. They took an entire quarter to get down to talk to me in the locker room, which to me is unacceptable. As a player, people have that expectation of you being professional, handling business, and in time of need. I wanted that from them, and I felt like I didn't get it. I mean, if there's one thing that I am going to agree with Kyle Van Noy, the Chiefs are going to do everything in their power to make sure they cheat you week in and week out. Coming up next here on the show, let's look at some more stuff going on around the Las Vegas Raiders. But before we get into that, how many people are actually going to this game? Let me know down below where you're going, where you're sitting. If anybody actually does want to go to the game, then here's the thing. You got to wait. I shouldn't say you have to wait, but you're going to get the best deal if you wait, and you should definitely download the Game Time app. But remember, if I send you there, you're going to get an awesome discount. 20% off with code CHATSPORTS. $20 off, with code CHATSPORTS. I talk about Game Time all the flipping time, and yet still got it wrong. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code CHATSPORTS, that's CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Now, one of the things that they have right now, which I really want to be able to highlight, is the Game Time picks. It's curation, which makes it easier to save more on sports. You can also, if you're going to Baltimore, you got concerts, comedy, theater, all that. The all-in pricing is definitely something that I also really encourage people to look at when it comes to Game Time, because a lot of other ticketing apps, you buy a ticket and you go to checkout and it's just like, wait a minute, that's so much extra money. I didn't expect that. That's not going to happen with Game Time. Whatever you see, that's what you're going to end up paying. And then you can also go through and they offer you all these different deals. Like, there's the Game Time pick. This is the best deal available. This one's going to save you like $34 extra on a ticket. This one's in the top 1 percentile. This one's going to save 10%. If you're like me, I want to feel like I'm always getting a good deal. I'm a man of deals. If you watch the show, you know that I'm a man of deals. So download Game Time right now. $20 off with code CHATSPORTS. Prices drop the closer that the event gets, so that's just going to be my pro tip to you. And again, to make sure that Game Time knows that I sent you, download the Game Time app, create an account, and you got to use code CHATSPORTS, that's CHATSPORTS, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. If anybody has trouble finding any of these comments or the link, I'm going to put it in the comments and in the description of today's show. So let's keep it moving here. It's Inside Look. I'm Mitchell Renz, host of the Raiders Report, and what we're going to be looking at now is some of the biggest weaknesses for the Baltimore Ravens on the offensive side of the football. Then we're going to go to the defensive side of the football. I asked Joey, and I said, what right now concerns you the most? It's the offensive line. They only have 2 returning starters, but when you look at how bad they were last week against Kansas City, the Raiders actually were one of the better defensive teams, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But here are the offensive line grades according to PFF. They really struggled on that right side, and if I'm the silver and black, I'm going out there, and that's where I'm targeting. I'm targeting the right side of that line with Maxx Crosby, Christian Wilkins, and then it's their run blocking grades. They struggled to run the football a little bit. I know they have one of the best centers in the league with Linderbaum, but like Andrew Voris, Daniel Falele, whatever the hell that guy's name is, Makari, Rosengarner. Kind of actually miss saying that name. But for Baltimore, you know that they're going to want to run the rock. For the Raiders, they got to be physical. They got to dominate in the trenches. And I think when you look at some of those numbers, maybe it calms you down a little bit more. Let's go to the next thing here. Zay Flowers is the only wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens. And when you talk about talent overall from top to bottom, I know we're going to talk about Mark Andrews. I know we're going to talk about Isaiah Likely, but controlling this game from a standpoint of not letting these guys beat you deep, because Nelson Aguilar's a field stretcher. Rashawn Bateman's a field stretcher. Zay Flowers, a very dynamic player that can beat you underneath, can beat you over top. If I'm Las Vegas, I'm putting my best guy on Zay. For me personally, I want Nate Hobbs on Zay Flowers or Jack Jones on Zay Flowers. Both guys showed me a lot last week, and I really am a little bit frustrated with some Raider fans out there putting some blame on this defense. the defense out there was not the problem last week for the Raiders. And I'm really confident that you're going to see, again, another good defensive performance here for Las Vegas. Let's go to the next one here. Ravens stretching the field. A lot of dinking and dunking. Now, I don't know if Luke Getsy's their offensive coordinator as well, but when you look at this throw chart here by Lamar Jackson from Next Gen Stats, a lot of the completions are within like that 20-yard frame, and then they're even closer. Like, it's a lot of short passes. They're trying to get the ball out quick, and that's probably because they don't have a lot of confidence in their offensive line. It's also they know what the strength is for Lamar Jackson. So I need you to fill in the blank here. You can make the blank a little bit bigger. The Raiders will win this game if. What needs to happen for the Raiders to end up winning this game? I got my keys to victory coming up here in just a little bit where I'll break down some of mine, but I do want to know, and if you could, please fill in the blank. What do the Raiders need to do in order to win this game? Let's now go to the Ravens side here. We got some weaknesses. Lack of edge depth was one of the things that Joey ended up telling me here, where they ended up losing Jadeveon Clowney last offseason, and it's probably Jadeveon's like one of his best years that he's had. But they got Brent Urban, Michael Pierce, and then one of the other players that I really wanted them to be able to go out and get is Justin Matabuke at the defensive tackle spot. But reminder, they don't have Kyle Van Noy, or they're unlikely to have Kyle Van Noy. And then Odafe Owe, I do think he's one of the more up-and-coming young players here. Baltimore, they're going to try to beat you in a lot of different looks. This is an organization that has always had a really, really good defense, but the lack of edge depth, maybe if we can get them a little bit more tired, maybe we run the football a little bit more effectively, that's how we end up winning this game. Losing Kyle Van Noy, again, you're not going to have a lot of depth. We can go to the next one right there, just because losing Van Noy, not only is he a versatile player, he's one of the leaders there of that defense. And then Roquan Smith versus the pass. Roquan is a good defender. I don't want to get that twisted, but he is a liability in pass coverage. So if I'm Las Vegas, I'm putting Brock Bowers on Roquan Smith. I'm putting Michael Mayer on Roquan Smith. When I go out there and I do 12 personnel, if I'm not going to target one of my tight ends, or if I have Devontae one-on-one, I also want to try to bring a little bit more pre-snap motion with Trey Tucker, see where Roquan goes, and if Roquan ends up sticking with one of my tight ends, that's a mismatch every single time, and hopefully it's a mismatch that Getsy, Gardner Minshew ends up taking advantage of. The final thing that we got to talk about here on today's show is my keys to victory against the Ravens. No cap, this is going to be a tough game. And I think everybody knows that. You're on the road up against a team that, quite frankly, I think is a top 3, top 4 team in the National Football League. But my keys to victory, and the first one is Luke Getsy can't be vanilla. When I heard Luke Getsy talk to the media on Thursday, it about made me throw up. I thought he was, I'm not even kidding you when I say this, I thought Josh McDaniels was in a Luke Getsy costume. That's how scared it made me. He's got to stretch the field. He's got to run something besides that looks like a high school offense. Luke Getsy, I'm calling for you. You got to stop being vanilla, man. Another one, interior offensive line needs to be able to block better. I was impressed by Dylan Parham. I'm really looking at Andre James, and I'm looking at Cody Whitehair. Those two guys got to step it up. If we don't have the ability to be able to run on the inside, this is going to be a long game. The Raiders posted a minus 13.8 EPA on running back runs in week 1. That was the worst in the National Football League, according to Warren Sharp. So that tells you right there a lot what you need to know. The Raiders sucked at running the ball in the interior, which is exactly what the tape ended up showing. So one of the common things that I've been hearing week in and week out, this week, is who deserves more snaps at the running back spot. If we can't block on the inside and we have a better job of maybe getting out to the outside with Madison, should Madison get some more reps than Zamir White? Who deserves more snaps week 2 and week 2 only? If you think it's Zeus, type 3. If you think it's Madison, give me a 22 down below. For me personally, I still think that you could split it. I hope Zamir gets it because he's the more important back for us this season. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was Alexander Madison. Let's go to the next key to victory. It's not rocket science. You can't turn the ball over. And it's not only turning the ball over like with Gardner Minshew, Zamir White's fumble, the interception. It's also turning the ball over on 4th down and 1. It's also missing extra points or field goal opportunities there for Daniel Carlson. You're not going to beat the Ravens on the road if you turn over the football. And quite frankly, if you turn it over the way you did last week, I think you're going to get really blown out, man. Limit the big Lamar running plays. Lamar Jackson is an unbelievable athlete. Again, Devontae Adams said that he's the best runner with the football in the NFL, in NFL history. If you limit his running, that makes him a little bit more one-dimensional, which kind of goes to my next point here. You got to make the Ravens beat you with their passing game. I don't think that they have the receivers. I don't think that they have the pass-catching talent that the Raiders do compared on that defensive side of the football. And if you make Baltimore one-dimensional, that's where you can get that's where they really do truly struggle. If the Raiders get out to an early lead, they make Lamar pass, and they really limit some of those big runs, that's going to really help out the Raiders. And for anybody that doesn't understand how great that Raiders defense was last week, the Raiders had a 71.7 success rate defensively in week 1. That was second best in the National Football League. It was also their highest success rate in a game since 2021. The Raiders defense was not the problem. I know they gave up some points and some rushing yards late in that game, but it's because they were tired. It's because they turned over the ball technically 4 times, put their defense in bad field position maybe 5 times. If the Raiders do these 5 things here, Luke Getsy can't be vanilla. The interior line blocks a lot better. Do not turn over the football. Limit Lamar's running plays and then makes the Ravens pass. I believe that the Las Vegas Raiders will end up winning this football game. Also, when you talk about the running aspect of it, when Lamar starts get cooking, the running backs for Baltimore, they get cooking as well. Baltimore running backs had a 64.3 success rate. That was a league high last week. Slow down Lamar, it slows down their running game, and it really kind of impacts this team from top to bottom. It's not a surprise. Lamar's a 2-time MVP. I know it's a lot easier said than done, but if I'm the Raiders, you got to do everything in your power to make sure that he don't have a good game against you. So in conclusion, the Raiders need to play a near-perfect game in order to get a win on the road. This is going to be a tough environment. That place is going to be rocking and rolling. They're also 0-1, coming off a Thursday Night Football loss. They have the extra rest. This is the type of game where 1-1's a lot different than 0-2. Quite frankly, you go 0-2, and it's going to get really, really ugly here at the Raiders Report.